Hello, great to have your company today. I hope you've been enjoying a wonderful week. Today's guest is a guitarist who's played with English band Roxy Music since 1972. He's produced albums and tracks for Pink Floyd's David Gilmour, for Rod Stewart, as well as for New Zealand's Split Enz. Now Phil Manzanera has a new solo album out with Crowded House's Tim Finn, and he joins me to talk about how he and his friend collaborated on it. Phil also chats about his time in Roxy Music and what the 50th anniversary tour was really like.
Hello.
Hello, Phil Manzanera. Lovely to meet you. How are you?
Lovely to meet you, Sandy. How are you doing?
Terrific. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
There's so much to talk to you about. Maybe we start with the latest stuff and work our way backwards.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You've got a brand new album called The Ghost of Santiago that you've done with your buddy Tim Finn, who, of course, is very well known to us from Crowded House.
Absolutely. And of course, Split Enz.
And Split Enz, yes, of course.
We go back a long way to 1975 when the first Roxy tour of Australia. And I met him and the rest of the guys at the Hordern Pavilion when they were the support act for us in Sydney, yeah. But yeah, The Ghost of Santiago, this is the second album of a batch of songs that we started when lockdown happened, really. And Tim sent me an email from Auckland and said, have you got any beats or any Latin grooves, especially slow Latin grooves? He was in that kind of strange mood. So I said, sure, you've come to the right place. I started sending him stuff. And then when I ran out of Latin stuff, I just looked in my computer and just found anything that I had lying around. And I would send it to him and he would literally send it back within 24 hours with singing on it and with words sometimes. And I just thought, this is impossible. How is he doing it? He must have been storing up stuff, must have a book somewhere full of lyrics and his works on all the time. I have worked this way all my life, really, because with Roxy, it was always do the music first, and then Brian would try and write a top line to it and some words. And I don't think Tim was really used to that. He's a proper songwriter where he can sit with a guitar or piano and hum a melody and then craft it up, just like you see Paul McCartney doing. That's a unique kind of person. But I was never like that, and Roxy were never like that. So I think he quite enjoyed this new challenge. He'd say, no, I want to just write to whatever you send me as a sort of discipline.
An exercise, yeah,
very different, interesting process. But all the music out of the 25 tracks that we ended up writing are virtually completely different. But what unifies it all is Tim's wonderful voice and his, storytelling that he gets into. And, The Ghost of Santiago, the actual track, is a classic sort of Tim profane sort of story about a priest who's trying to elope with a nun, who falls in love with a nun and tries to elope with her, but she doesn't turn up at the meeting place. And it's set in Santiago. In his mind, he was setting it in Santiago de Chile.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was setting it in Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Santiago, Tim has never been there, but I have been there. Yeah, I played there with David Gilmour when I was on tour with David Gilmour. We played in a big stadium and it was fantastic. And the punters, the guys and girls, they're just such a great audience. They just love. South Americans love rock music. I mean, Argentina and places like that, they just love heavy metal. It's totally bizarre. And they love Pink Floyd and they love all that kind of stuff. I was brought up in South America, so I'm expecting everyone to just love salsa or cumbia or tango.
And that's not the case. I was going to say, you've always had a bit of a passion for Latin grooves, haven't you?
Yeah, well, because that's how I started. In Cuba, with my mum teaching me. My mum was Colombian, from Barranquilla in Colombia. My father was British. But she started having guitar lessons when I was about 6.
Wow.
And to get rid of this annoying little brat that was me, she said, look, I'm just going to have to teach you to play something, because otherwise it's going to drive me mad. It's all this plucking the strings and things. So that's why I started with, Latin American songs and things like that. So it's way before rock and roll for me.
Right. You founded your first band in about 1966, is that right?
Well, hardly. A school band. When you're at school, you want to get together with your chums and make music, and I begged my parents to send me to England when I was 9 from Venezuela, because I wanted to, I was virtually an only child, because my brother and sister lived in, they went to boarding school in England. So I wanted to be with other people, with other
kids,
siblings and things, So I said, send me to boarding school in England. And also the music is incredible. So I arrived, can you imagine, I arrived in September 1960, the beginning of the 60s in England, and all the music that came out just drove me wild. The Beatles, the Stones, the Who, the Hendrix. So at school, we all wanted to be like, our heroes. Let's form a band. Surely you can learn to play 2 chords,
Is that all it took?
It was pretty pathetic what we used to play, but we
thought
tried.
You were cool.
Yeah, we were cool. And then gradually, as I got older, the musicians I found at the school were great, actually. And I mean, one of them has ended up being Peter Gabriel's guitarist for the last 40 years. Those school boy chums turned out to be actually
lifelong musical chums.
Yeah, serendipitous. But you're meeting Tim and Neil when he was quite young, when they sent him to England in 1975 to join Split Enz. It's great. It's like having more chums, and here I am still. I mean, David Gilmour I've known since I was 16. He lives next door. I speak with Tim all the time. I saw Neil play at Hampton Court Palace. There's just the same chums, if you like. It's very nice, just to have friends who you like, who happen to be great musicians.
I can imagine. And that you get to work with also. It's awesome.
Yeah, you get to work with them. But, me and Tim, I just sent stuff and backwards and forwards. And really, for the first 18 months, we didn't even think of something like Zoom, because we had no idea how to do Zoom. But then, obviously all our children taught us how to do Zoom. Crikey, I haven't actually seen you. We've been doing all this music, I haven't actually seen you at all. So then we went on Zoom and had like long chats, which I filmed actually, which are up on my...
I saw those.
Yeah, just talking about how we met and just chewing the cud, as they say. And obviously we won't be doing that again. But we have had our sort of grumpy old men sort of type of hilarious discussions.
So you're happy with this new album?
I'm very happy with this new album, and I'll tell you why. Because it provides a choice for people. When I listen, and I listen to everything, and I'm up with everything that's going on, the young artists and rap and hip hop and stuff like that. And I think what we have on our 2 albums is something very different. So, if anyone's looking for something different, then tap into The Ghost of Santiago, because it's a sort of an album in the old-fashioned way. It's not trying to have a hit single, or we brought it out ourselves on my own label. There's no big company behind it. It's just a couple of guys saying, let's do some stuff. And then because of the digital age, I know how to put the stuff out.
Is there a favorite track?
Well, I know Tim's favorite track is Our Love, but I quite like the first one, Space Cannibal, because when I did the music to send to Tim, I thought, wow, I've never heard anything like this before, this strange track. And I thought he'll never be able to sing over the top of this. And of course, he came back with this track called Space Cannibal, which is sort of an environmental type song, really, about the sun gobbling up everything, being a space cannibal. And I thought, wow.
Right. It sounds like you liked everything he did and he liked everything you did, like the perfect match.
Well, it was. And I think, you know, we've done these 25 and that's probably it. You know, we won't want to push our luck, you know, because it's worked and we're both happy. And at the end of the day, you know, this is the 50th year of me being a professional musician. And actually, I think it probably is for Tim, to tell you the truth. And when you've been in it for a long time, you just want to be happy. You know, you just want to do some good work that you're happy with. And you just like set it off. And then if anyone else likes it, that's great. But provided you're happy, you know, it keeps you off the streets.
Talking about 50 years, it's been a little longer than that since Phil joined one of the most iconic British prog rock bands of the 70s and 80s in Roxy Music. What an incredible run you've had with that band.
Yes, I joined literally a week before they signed the first management contract. I saw an ad in the Melody Maker. They were looking for a guitarist, and I'd heard about them through a demo tape they'd sent to a journalist. And I went to meet them for an audition. And I knew that they were a little bit older than me, but I knew they were very special. You know, when you walk into this tiny little house in Battersea in London, and there's Brian Ferry, you know, and Andy Mackay and Brian Eno. And I thought, these guys are really cool, you know. I thought, I want to join their band. But, you know, I failed the audition.
Did you?
I failed the audition. But we got on very well as like friends. And they got in a guy who had been in a famous band called The Nice, called David List. And that didn't work out. After a couple of months, I got a call and said, will you come try out, really? Although they did say, come and try out to mix the sound, not to play guitar. And when I turned up, there happened to be a guitar there and I said, oh, fancy having a play. So on my 21st birthday, that's the 31st of January, 1972, I was looking at the abyss. I had nothing, no gigs, you know. My friend had joined a professional band. I thought, I've got nothing going for me. The next day, I had this call to come and meet the guys again. The day after that, they asked me to join. The following week, I was playing in a pub in Hammersmith here. The week after that, we signed the first management contract. 4 weeks later, we're in the studio recording the first album. 8 weeks later, the album was released on the same day as Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie. And we were supporting him at a pub in Croydon. Yeah. And then the album was done before. It happened, it was like Christmas every day.
Virginia Plain was Roxy Music's first hit in the UK. Phil improvised his guitar solo during the recording by playing the first thing that came into his head. And with its success, Phil's head really started to spin. Roxy Music's popularity exploded with their debut self-titled album in 1972. The group had been described as merging elements of glam rock and art rock, and although they didn't know it yet, they'd go on to significantly influence early English punk music by providing a model for the new wave acts to come.
We called ourselves inspired amateurs, you know, and we had to really like put our skates on to get more professional. So we did like loads and loads of gigs. Tiny gigs, loads and loads to practice up and get more professional because we were getting bigger and we were on the TV Top of the Pops and suddenly the single was number 4 and everything was happening and we were off, you know, catapulted.
Yeah. Nobody was ready for this success.
No, I mean, well, Brian and Andy had been to university and Brian had studied fine art. And Andy had done music at Reading University. Eno had gone to art college. And the same teachers who taught him taught Pete Townsend. When we turned up, eventually we got to know David Bowie quite well. And he was amazed that we just appeared out of nowhere because this was like his 4th album or Ziggy Stardust or something.
He'd already paid his dues.
Yeah, paid his dues, done hundreds of different kinds of music. And suddenly these buggers turn up fully formed. I said, where did they come from? This is ridiculous. And so he loved us, and he was very nice to us and helped us.
So what was it like for you? I mean, I can imagine, actually, I can't imagine. I'm not sure anybody listening could actually imagine the whirlwind that you were caught in. It must have felt like you were in this tumble dryer with a big smile on your face.
It was like, I used to say, it was like Christmas every day. I mean, if you grow up with the Beatles when you're 9 or 10 or 11, and then you dream about being in a band and everything you imagine it might be like, to actually get into a band and then get into that band, it's like I won the I felt so lucky, you know. I guess it's serendipity that that collection of people met at that time and produced something that's gone on, and here we are 50 years later.
When you say that you failed the audition in the first place, what went wrong?
Well, I had a terrible cold for a start. I was blowing my nose the whole time. I played them some of the material of the band I was in before, which was prog rock, very funny time signatures and stuff like that. They hated it. But I thought, oh, well, don't listen to that. I can do simple, you know. I guess I was pretty nervous as well. It was the first audition I'd actually ever been to. And auditions are scary things.
Anyway, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said that you instantly recognized that they had something special, each individual and between them.
Yeah, just as people. They were not like people I'd met before. You know, I was only like 18 months out of school, and they were 5 or 6 years older. Can you imagine when you're at school and you're 13 and there's 18-year-olds?
Yeah.
They seem like, oh, so grown up, you know. And they had bank accounts and they had cars and they had things like that. It was like, whoa.
Obviously, over time, that age gap narrowed and you didn't feel like that anymore. No. You get on with everybody really well?
We've had ups and downs like any band or any sort of family, really. After a time, you forget. If you've had an argument with someone about something, then the time passes and you forget. Why did I have an argument with him? I cannot for the life of me remember. I think I'm annoyed with him, but I can't remember why. So let it go, you know. And then you get back together and you start playing music. And especially these songs bring us together. You know, we look at the songs and say, wow, that would be fun to play that. Because I actually haven't played that for 10 years. So I've got to relearn how to play it, obviously, you know.
Don't ever expect to hear new music from Roxy Music. As Phil says, there simply isn't any.
There's 8 albums, you see. There's 80 songs.
Right, 80 songs. Okay. And do you have a favourite amongst those?
Well, I have a few that I enjoy for different reasons. Obviously, for me, songs have a different resonance because I remember where we recorded them and, you know, events that happened during, for instance, there's a track called In Every Dream Home a Heartache, which is almost like a profane song. It's about, you know, an inflatable doll. This guy who has this relationship. And this was on the second Roxy album. And, you know, when we played it live in theatres in the UK, people would very cheekily buy inflatable doll, and then you'd see it coming from the back of the theatre towards the stage, being passed over people's heads. And, you know, it's meant to be sort of tense sort of song, and you just couldn't help but just like starting to laugh. This thing was coming towards you. And then when it explodes at the end into a big guitar solo, it's like, it was a lot of fun.
Roxy Music always struck me as a group of guys who did take themselves very seriously, themselves and the music, right?
Well, yeah. How wrong could you be, really? I mean, it's a lot of fun and laughter in doing the Roxy stuff. But I guess, you know, Brian's image was pretty cool and sort of suave and all that kind of thing. So I guess that's where that comes from. There's quite a few jokers
amongst you. Well, but it wasn't Brian. He always appeared to be very aloof and standoffish and very serious in what he did. And you couldn't touch him. You couldn't get near him. He just He was like,
Yeah,
put himself on
give
the
him
mountaintop.
true. Give him a few drinks, and the Geordie in him comes out. From northeast. He becomes very funny and quite lively.
Ah, good to know. Why hasn't there been anything new from Roxy in a long time?
Well, actually, I mean, we did try and do something. We went in the studio with Eno and with Chris Thomas, our original producer, and we laid down some tracks and we started working on them. And then we just lost the sort of spark, and we thought it doesn't really sound better than some of the stuff we did before. So perhaps we'll just abandon it. And we did.
Right.
Much to the disappointment of the record company.
I'm sure, but I think it's a good thing to know when to give it away, isn't it?
Yeah, and I
pushing
think
the proverbial uphill if it's not flowing.
Well, yes, I think there's a certain element of like, lots of people would say, "Oh, why don't you do a new album or something like that?" And then if it wasn't very good, they'd say, "Oh, that was awful. Why did you do that?"
Yeah.
We are quite expendable to people unless you come up with the goods. And fair enough, there's historically, if you look at pop music and rock music, it's quite rare for people to do really good work that compares with their early work. I'm not sure if there's a lot left in terms of recording new stuff. I have played on some of Brian's new stuff, where I don't know whether it'll end up or he'll rub it out. I'd normally say to him, "Look, I'll play whatever you want. If you don't like it, just rub it out. I really don't care." And normally he does rub it out. We just all into music. I mean, whether it's Eno, Brian Ferry, Andy Mackay, Paul Thompson, all doing music. These whole 50 years, and different kinds of music with different people, just enjoying being in music.
You've spent a lot of time doing your own solo stuff. And then, of course, you've worked with Split Enz a lot too. You produced their stuff, didn't you?
Well, I produced what over here was their first album in England, but it was actually called Second Thoughts in Australia. And then I did a single called Another Great Divide, I think. Tim and Neil and even Eddie played on my solo album, K-Scope. And then Tim has played sang on some of my other solo albums as well. So we have continued doing bits and pieces, whenever we happen to be in the same place or it suited,
How does the skill of being a great musician translate into becoming a great producer?
It doesn't necessarily. There's a lot of psychology in production. There's different kinds of producers as well. There's engineers who become producers. There's lots of those. Or there's the George Martin school of production. And that's the kind of thing that I aspire to, which is a person who can stand back, think conceptually, not twiddle all the knobs and the dials, know what it all does, but be able to say, what would happen if we did that? Or what's this song about? Let's get to the core of, it's a more sort of artistic side. And then be someone there to just say, well, that's great, but you could do it this other way if you wanted to try it. And that's my kind of style. It's not like Phil Spector's like, we're going to
do it,
have this sound. And do
no, I can imagine you'd be really affable to work with, and it'd just go back and forward between whoever you were working with. The Finn brothers must have been really pleased to have you on board, and what they put out really set them on their way, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they have just an incredible talent. It must be in their DNA. I'm sure it's their Irish genes or something. There've been certain special people that I've worked with, like Godley and Cream, over the years, who are fantastic songwriters and just can do magic. And the Finn brothers are the same. Other people are more complicated, but talented in a different way. So, for instance, when I produced David Gilmour and helped produce a Pink Floyd album, that's a totally different kind of thing when you've got a great guitarist, and I'm a guitarist, and also a friend, and someone with a beautiful voice like David. You've got to just be another ear. He could do it all himself if he wanted to, but it's boring and he needs someone to bounce his ideas off.
And bounce David Gilmour did very successfully. It was the Pink Floyd founder's third solo album. It was also his first solo album in 22 years and featured Jools Holland, David Crosby and Graham Nash. In his 5 decades plus career, guitarist Phil Manzanera has become synonymous with the British rock band Roxy music since their groundbreaking 1972 debut album. During the periods when the group was either active or on hiatus, Phil made a name for himself as both a solo artist and a producer-collaborator with the likes of Split Enz, Rod Stewart and Pink Floyd's David Gilmour.
So that's a whole different world, you know, in the sort of Pink Floyd world and touring with them. It's like money's no object. You know, you can have the best equipment. He has a studio on a boat on a 1920s boat that belonged to Charlie Chaplin's manager, parked by Hampton Court Palace on the River Thames in London. I mean, I'd just sit at the back of the boat and look out. So it was just like a dream, you know, because I met him when I was 16. He was a friend of my brother's, to ask him how to become a professional musician. And he says he can't remember what he said, but it must have been good, because 5 years later I got into Roxy.
Must have been great advice. Oh, yeah. I wish you could remember it. We could pass it on.
Yeah.
Phil, you're a man of all shades of music, aren't you? Your own solo stuff is very different to the Roxy stuff. The Roxy stuff is very different to the Split Enz and Crowded House stuff. And of course, that is so different to the Pink Floyd stuff as well. Is it that you just like everything?
I don't like everything, but I do have a very large musical palette to draw on, because I like the best of jazz, classical, experimental, avant-garde music. You know, music helps me. It helps my mental health. It's a form of therapy. It's always been, and I can see how that has a resonance for other people. So that's why I can jump in. The other day, I got a call and said, will you come and produce a few tracks for Jools Holland and Rod Stewart? It's like old-fashioned big jazz type thing with a 26-piece box. I said, I haven't done anything like that ever before. Sure, what could possibly go wrong? So I jumped in and it was incredibly enjoyable, you know.
Phil has recently added another string to his bow. He's written his memoir. It's called Revolution to Roxy. Revolution spelt the Spanish way.
Basically, it's pronounced that way because it starts really in Havana, Cuba, when I was 6 or 7, and it sort of ends pretty much after the 2022 last concert of Roxy Music at the O2 in London. It's like making sense of where our family came from, which starts in 1492 in Spain, and then also making sense of the 52 years of Roxy music and going forward. So it's about me trying to make sense of that.
What was the impetus for it?
Well, I think when you get to my age, I'm 73 now, you tend to look back and you think, I wish I'd asked my parents more questions about where we came from, what they did when they were young and stuff. And so many people don't. And then they sort of regret it later. I thought for my children and my grandchildren, let's do a bit of digging and see what comes out and put it down on the page. So I had a go, and it took me like 2 months to write the first 2 chapters. And I thought, this is never going to happen. And actually, I know now that any further books are never going to happen, because it is so difficult being a writer, much easier being a musician. At the end of the day, it took a long time, 7 years.
And did you end up enjoying it?
Well, what happened in the end is that I realized that what I needed was a producer. I found a guy to help me, and my wife as well. And between them, they sort of produced me. So it was painful because I'm not good at a typewriter and stuff.
Right.
It was a team effort, really.
So you're pretty happy with the finished product?
Very happy with the finished product.
I know that you have a super interesting story, but you've also got a lot of messages. So if they've come out in the book, readers are going to get lots out of it for sure, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is the musical side, there's Roxy, and then right up to doing the albums with Tim and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can get it from Amazon or Barnes and Nobles.
Okay. So, Phil, you said that it goes up to when you finished that 50th anniversary tour with Roxy in 2022. Tell me a little bit about that. How was it for you? When we last spoke, you were telling me that you had to relearn the songs because you hadn't played them for at least a decade. How was that whole experience for you?
Well, not only to have to relearn the songs, but I had to relearn them in different keys. Because what happens with majority of singers, obviously, as they get older, their voices change and they can't sing them in the original keys. So that was a real head job, actually, trying to work out how to play original Roxy songs in different keys. Because the reason you write a song in a certain key is because it has the right sound in that key. When you change the keys, it changes the whole song. We spent a lot of time trying to work out how to make it sound like the original. But overall, it was fabulous. It was a great, great tour. It was the only time where we've been able to play Roxy songs in the correct visual context. We had an amazing set of screens and things that was new tech. I really felt proud that we were up there because I knew that that was the last time we'd ever tour. When we finished at the O2, we said, that's it, we're done. So thankful that it ended on a good note. You know, I mean, there will be more Roxy stuff coming out in terms of, you know, the tour. We filmed it and we recorded it, and there's a Dolby Atmos version of Avalon coming out, and all sorts of box sets and things like that. But there will be no more touring.
Was it a little bittersweet?
Well, with the audience, I mean, every night, you know, you stand on stage, you look at them and see what the resonance was with the punters in the seats, and they're singing along and everything. It was quite emotional. You know, I thought at the end, well, this is the last time you'll see us play live. So it really was like, goodbye.
How did the songs go over?
Well, you know, obviously in America, they came to Roxy quite late in some ways. And because of the fact that the track More Than This was in a few films and stuff, it was the one that you could see people singing, especially women, looking at Brian singing all the lyrics. I personally enjoyed the early stuff a lot more. And actually, the early stuff was a chance for me and Andy to really go off-piste and do some crazy, wacky kind of playing. And people were amazed because a lot of people have never seen that side of Roxy. You know, they've seen a very smooth sort of side. And so they really loved it.
Which song do you enjoy playing most?
Well, because I get to wig out, I enjoy Ladytron, the end of Ladytron. That is one where I just go bonkers, you know, and I always did. You know, me and Eno used to ham it up. I think that is great. Obviously, playing the singles and seeing people sing along, and, you know, we'd finish with cover, you know, Jealous Guy, which was a big hit. And that was one very touching, you know, on many levels, you know. Great stuff.
You finished with Jealous Guy. That was your encore.
Yeah.
Was everybody happy to wrap it up and go, job well done, fellas? Thanks for 52 years.
Yeah, well, we knew that the main people, you know, Brian Ferry, Andy Mackay, me, and Paul Thompson, we knew that there's business to be done still for years, for the rest of our lives. And in fact, me, Andy, and Paul started a new venture of what we originally said that the band was in 1972, which was an avant rock group. So we embraced that original mission statement and started again. It could have been a disaster, but it turned out to be fantastic. And we filmed it, recorded it as well. And in the light of what happened, we probably will next year do some gigs. There's much smaller things, but it's very different. It's impossible for me to describe what it is. And we brought out an album, actually, me and Andy, called AM PM.
It's fully instrumental.
Fully instrumental, but all the critics, it's very difficult for them to review instrumental. So it's either you like it or you don't like it, and then you take it from there. So
it turns out they did like it.
turns out they liked it very much. Yeah.
Is this the likely future for you, Phil Manzanera?
There's all sorts of projects that go with different people and exciting things. So I'm just continuing doing what I've always done. Please God that I stay healthy and able to do it. After 52 years, I'm making sense of it in the book. I just want to be happy. It doesn't need to be the most famous, successful thing in the world. I can just stay in my lane and chug along.
Fabulous. Well, Phil, congratulations on all your successes. And we can't wait to see what comes out of you next.
Well, kind of you to say that. Thank you.
Thank you for chatting with us today.
Okay. Cheers.
Roxy Music's delightful and very talented Phil Manzanera there. Thanks for giving me your ear today. I hope you've enjoyed and really got a lot out of hearing Phil's stories. Don't forget there are lots of other episodes of A Breath of Fresh Air that you can tune into too. I'm sure you'll find a host of artists that'll be of interest. My very best wishes to you for a safe and comfortable ongoing journey. I hope we'll meet again soon. Bye now.